At this particular time of the year, at this particular part of Dorset, people come from all sections of society to stay a few days at this, the great Dorset Steam Fair, and soak up an atmosphere of nostalgia and friendship like nowhere else I know. Many people are responsible for the organisation and running of this event, but there's no doubt about who is the leader of it all. The legendary Mike Oliver.
Yes, it's another year. We've come around and looking well at the moment. The weather's not too bad on us. The weather's going to be better, so I'm pleased about that. We've had one little setback or two with the storms, but fortunately nothing heavy's come in yet, so I think we'll get away with it if the weather's good.
So what are the plans for this year?
Same as everywhere, a bloody muddle I should think, and same as every time. But we usually force it in, but at the moment we're so strong here for entries that we can't even get another wheelbarrow in here. So we're very, very pushed for room this year, very pushed. It's because everybody wants to come here, thank God. But I think we've reached a stage now where we cannot take everybody who wants to come. We've got to do it in two halves. That Mr. A comes, I think, on 1 year, and the alternative, if you're Mr. B, turns up. We can't seem to get any more in here, and we can't go any bigger because we're on 600 acres now, and you know it's got a little bit to the limit. So we'll have to look for people now to sort themselves out in one lot 1 year, one the other. I'm not saying that the big fairground rides and the showman's engines and that won't always be here, but some of the littler ones that love to come for a holiday, it's unfortunate, but it's a case that I'm afraid every horse can't run in the Derby.
This year on the fields of Tarrant Hinton, we are proud to have the famous Moon Rocket, which not only delights many with its thrilling ride, but draws quite a crowd when being erected. And here's Howard Scholl, who is responsible for its restoration.
So years ago you wouldn't have been doing this with a crane then?
No, they used to handball them all on. They used to stand them up in a box trailer on end, which used to break all the backs of the cars. They had the wings to take off, and they used to break the backs of the cars. But that's the only way they could do it. They'd know the form of moving them. Well, initially, when it was all 110 volts, they had a 380 and a 360 amp set to run this. We've gone on to AC power, DC for the motors through a rectifier, 1000 amp rectifier, and AC power, which you need for the modern control systems, are all 240 AC. You know, you can't get sophisticated electric control systems on DC now. Well, you can't at all. You never have been able to do.
You were saying about the refurbishment of the cars.
Yeah, we'll be doing the cars this next year. All the insides have been done, and the outsides are going to be refurbished, repanelled, and hopefully, if I can get a fairground artist to come and redecorate them. But they're not the easiest men in the world to get hold of.
Exhibits are rolling in for many days leading up to the show, and here we see Robert Crabb, who's section leader of the steamroller section, bringing his Fowler and living van into the field. Unfortunately, there's a shortage of grip today, so once again we call on the services of Dave Butt with that well-worked old Fordson. Something for everybody. Let's stop a while and take a look at those beautiful owls.
How do you get involved in something like this then?
My parents were in the pet trade for 39 years, and well, I've always had birds around me, and this has been into birds of prey about 12 years now.
So how do you rear them?
I have my own free-flight aviaries at home, and we breed them from parents, and then we take them out of the nest for about 10 days old and hand rear them at home in the house, and they become members of the family.
So do you need any special kind of licence to keep these animals?
No, all birds are indigenous species to this country, are licensed by the Department of the Environment, but we do have to have a special dispensation licence to bring them out to shows like this.
So tell me a little bit about the bird's senses.
Basically, the eyes are fixed in the socket. Elsa, you're going to show your eyes, darling? Come on. There we are. As you can see, in the eyes are fixed to the socket, so if the bird wants to look round, it has to turn its head. Also, as it's just done, also the ears are in the facial disc of the bird. Come on, there we are. 10 to 4. So when the bird turns its head, it gets audio and visual at the same time, enable it to pinpoint its prey.
I suppose a lot of the public have a look at these and think, oh, I'd like to take one of those home.
Yes, a lot of work to keep them though. A lot of work to keep them up, keep them tall.
Does the sound of the traction engines and, you know, the general exhibits here alarm the birds at all?
No, because being hand reared, they accept the human being as being a friend rather than an enemy, which is the greatest help a bird of prey in the world has got, to keep away from human beings. No, they happily accept it.
This year, one of the directors, Robert Coles, has organised a collection of engines and machinery built by the famous John Fowler of Leeds. One proud Fowler owner is Paul Scully, who owns and operates the 1928 10 horsepower Duke of York.
So what's your duties this year then, Paul?
Well, we're down here. You can see this is the big Fowler here, so I suppose just being here as a Fowler owner, I suppose, with the old Duke of York's probably one of the biggest exercises.
So what are you going to be pulling in?
We're going to pull in there's a diesel loco, a Fowler-built diesel loco on the big trailer, so we'll be pulling that in at 1 o'clock, along with one or two other Northern engines.
And what engines are actually going to be pulling it in then?
Well, the Duke of York, there'll be Graham Love with Excelsior, Jim Smith with Pride of Wales, and there'll be John Bainbridge with his engine also. So they're all Northern engines, so we'll have to make a good display, won't we?
The kind of load that you're pulling today would be the sort of thing that this job would have done in its working life, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. You probably would, like, we have got probably 4 engines on load. You'd probably be taking the same load with 2 engines in the working days if it were on fairly level country, but yeah, you'd want 2 or 3 engines on a job like that.
Do you think there'll be any problems with you actually coming across a field as opposed to roading?
It'll be a bit heavier going because these engines were designed to pull heavy loads on hard roads, so I mean it will be a bit heavy going than what it would have been on a hard road, but it shouldn't be any problem. If it keeps dry, it'll be no problem. You know, if it gets a bit of rain on it, it makes it slippery.
and we do tend to slip about a bit, but should be okay.
Let's watch now as the engines, all Fowlers this year, climb the track to the top field where their load awaits them. One of the team, Jim Sarney, once described the atmosphere as similar to a Wembley Cup final. There's certainly plenty of anticipation and excitement as we await the arrival of the road train to herald the start of the show. Well, here we can see the hitching up operation. Looks simple, but it's all very skillful. And there's Dave Allen, the section leader, keeping a careful eye on his staff. To maneuver one of these monsters to within half an inch takes many years of practice. There's Jim Sarney, without an engine this year, but never out of the picture. All hands up in just a fraction of an inch. Gotcha.
What's going up here then, Jim?
Well, as you can see, we're loading up getting the engines coupled up now, ready to move this Fowler diesel shunting engine down to the main and ring. 63 ton load with a trailer, 125 ton gross train weight with the engine, and it's probably more like 160 tons you're pulling on this grass field. That's what people tend to forget. The actual drag on that trailer is increased by almost double on this type of ground compared with out on the road.
No, it's Fowlers this year.
It's Fowler here this year, yes. No, our day will come. It's an all-borough year very shortly, so we'll let these old boys have their play today. No, it's all right.
I suppose it's true to say that it's quite an exciting event every time you do it.
Oh, well, we try to make it that. We try to vary the loads and make it enjoyable for the public and something different. But, yeah, you may think, well, it's the same old cruise on it every year, but then it's got to be, because you can only afford to have a very experienced engineman on this job. Can't afford it to go wrong. So the men that are doing it, a lot of them have been doing it for the last 13 years now, believe it or not. We've been doing this heavy haulage, so they're well versed with what's going on.
The load on the trailer this year is a heavy locomotive built by Fowlers. Of course, this is Fowlers' year. And that weighs about 35 tons. It's a sort of shunting engine that you would have found in many of the heavy industry areas. This one belongs to the Preserve Railway down at Buckfastleigh. Once they got her in position, the next job is to line up for the annual photograph of the heavy haulage lads. And we are on the way to the field to start this year's Great Dorset Steam Fair. And now we come to the tricky bit. That's the descent. Because whereas the engines on the front are responsible for pulling the load, the ones on the back take over here and act as brakes down this difficult slope into the field. What a train that is. Everybody working hard, but you can bet your life everybody happy. The amount of skill and planning that goes into this annual event is unbelievable. And here they are now, coming through the main gate. No slippery surface now, no problems. Those 3 engines are going to keep their grip through that dusty gateway. Make sure that load reaches the main field. This is what the crowd love, to see something working, something on the move, something happening. That's what the heavy haulage section is all about.
Engine that they're carrying this year on the low loader is a Fowler-built engine, this being Fowler year. There will be no actual parade of Fowlers today, but the engines will be coming in from time to time, and David and I will be here to keep you informed on whatever's going on.
Informed and entertained, we hope.
I hope so, David. So there she is going down that huge shunting engine. Weighs about 30 tons on its own, and we were told by Jim Barney this morning. Of course, Jim is one of our main organisers of the steam section. A pair of chains to split.
And yet another Fowler, smoking heavy. This was a wonderful section this year, the Fowler section. Practically every type of implement made by Fowlers of Leeds was on exhibition here at the Great Dorset. Real credit to Robert Coles, that section organiser. We had the Showman's engines, the Crane engines, and even examples here of engines made for the Boer War and the First World War, because Fowler did a lot for those war efforts. He unfortunately didn't live to see his results, because he only lived some 40 odd years, being born in 1826, the son of a Quaker, a very successful merchant in Melksham in Wiltshire. But he of course moved to Leeds, where the name John Fowler of Leeds became famous and still is to this present day.
They got like the great balances on there, on the edge, and as I say, you could actually tie a brick on. Hey, it comes a heavy load. Here it comes. Yeah. One we've been waiting for. This is it. We've all been waiting for it. There you go.
I reckon the old Fowler on the top here, Mighty Light, will have to
Probably move out of the way, I would suggest.
Can you hear us up on Mighty Light?
Great.
Here we are, onto the field at last. This is what the crowd, and what a crowd we have. This is what they came to see, and this is what they enjoy. All those Fowlers performing in the heavy haulage arena known as the Playpen. 1, 2, 3 engines in front, one behind, and a Fowler engine on the back. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Fowlers out there. The sixth one being the man upon the Fowler locomotive himself. His name was, by coincidence this year, John Fowler. There they go, taking turn. A lot of skill in this, working together. Much of it done by whistle signal.
Martin back doing the solo run.
Here they come. Shunting, you just need lots of power, no speed really. But
no problem with grip. What a lovely dry show we enjoyed. And at last they come down the slope, ready to make the ascent up through what we know locally as the Watford Gap. A 1 in 12 incline. Just look at those crowds leaning against the fences. There they stayed the whole of the day for 5 days, just watching these big, massive engines pull the big loads. And there's a Burrell engine we see back view of now. That's Lord Fisher of Lambeth. Been coming to this show for many, many years. One of the originators of the heavy haulage section, the amalgamated heavy haulage.
coal lads. The phone wagons which are lined up around the one side of the heavy haulage area, they need some water and coal.
This is where we begin to get a good bark from the chimneys now. And the more they work, the hotter they get. And there's number 3, that crane engine there, blowing off steam like a good one. Oh, how those old contractors of way back would be proud to see those engines still working and working hard, getting that locomotive to the top of this hill. What a sight. Jim Sarney keeping an eagle and skillful eye on it all, waving them to the standstill. Lack of grip here. Now watch we do. I know, put some cinders down, nothing better and nothing more plentiful than a few shovelfuls of cinders. There's that famous name on the smoke box, John Fowler of Leeds. Another very popular area is the thrashing area. Always takes me back to my childhood, when we loved to see the arrival of the thrashing tackle in our village. Nice to see we have the young ladies helping us. This was a common sight during World War II, when much of this type of work was carried out by those unrecognised heroes, the land girls. It's amazing how these crews collect together and work at shows such as these on a strictly voluntary basis. Many of them take holiday just for the sake of coming here to the Great Dorset and work hard for 5 long days. Well, I know from experience that this is hard and dusty work, but there are plenty of refreshment up at the Great Dorset to dampen down the dust. And I think the fascinating part of this section is that you can see it all work and you can see the guts of it. All this modern machinery is enclosed and electronically controlled, but look at those belts and movements there. You can just stand there long enough, you can work out just how it all comes about. And not only is the thrashing tackle built by Marshalls, but so too is the driving unit, that famous old Marshall single-cylinder diesel tractor. Steady eye kept on the end product. How's that for quality? Chalmers doing its bit. These tractors were made famous over here during World War II under the lease lend agreement. In this instance, we are seeing the mill in operation, making the flour. All this equipment, beautifully preserved, so that we can see what Grandad had to put up with in his day. There you are, there's your snap, crackle and pop in the roll there. There's no doubt about it that this working tractor section is a show in itself.
all the time we're thinking that Jack's going to appear with his pipe from up behind the engine at any one time, giving us sort of remarks about the engine and the past history. But it's great that it's been saved and not left the country, which could have been a lot worse than it being stored in Beaulieu. The fact that it's now in the Beaulieu Museum has at least released another fine showman's engine out of the museum, which is going to be overhauled and will be here possibly in another year. So we think that possibly Jack had done the right thing by us in the long run to put the engine into storage for a period and give it a rest. And perhaps one day we might see it out again in steam, God willing.
Now this engine has spent a lot of time at the Great Dorset Steam Fair over the years, hasn't it?
It has. It's spent many years, coming every year, year in, year out, and Jack has presented it in the very early days, and he was here about 3 years ago with it, was the last time, and that was a sad note to us all when he found he was too ill to come for any future shows.
Now Lenny Crane was the last person to drive this, wasn't he?
I believe so. Lenny Crane did the funeral procession, which we all attended. And I believe the engine has been in steam once since, when he was presented with an honour from the Cancer Research Organisation, which he contributed so much over many years. Unfortunately, the honour was awarded posthumously, but the engine was steamed, I believe, for that one occasion.
To most people coming in here, this would look like a lump of scrap.
That's correct, but it was a fine engine in its day. It was built in 1932 for the show organisation Anderton Rowland, and they had it all through the years up to the war, and it was in regular use in one of their most famous engines. It was purchased in the 1950s by a gentleman called Ernie Lucas of Salisbury, and he has maintained it all his life ever since. And even though it's never hardly been shown, he has kept it in its original condition. And of the last 4 showmans that were built by John Fowler, this is the only one that has retained all its original fittings to the end. It's now come for its first overhaul, which is the first time since 1932, and it's had to have a major repair to the boiler. But all other fittings on it are in quite serviceable in working order, and there's no problem with the engine whatsoever. And we're hoping that this time next year that the engine will be back in service again in its full glory.
Well, Ron, here's a replica of the Lion that you built yourself, so you must be quite an enthusiast.
Yes, I have been ever since 1982, when I first sort of seen the engine in Bert Dibbins' yard, when he had a one-day steam up. We went along and started taking photographs and sizes, and eventually I researched into it and got all the works drawings and that sort of thing, and the engine has taken 14 years to complete. It is an exact replica of the engine as it was in the days of 1932-34, when it was with Anderton Rowlands for fairground duties.
So what would this engine have done in its working life then?
Well, the engine in its working life would have hauled all the fairground equipment from fair to fair, and when it reached at the fairground it used the crane, which is at the back, to erect the rides, and then once the rides were all erected, the generator was given the electric current to drive all the rides whilst the fair was in operation and light all the lights.
Certainly looks a good model, this one. So how many hours have you spent?
Approaching 5,000 hours in 14 years.
And alongside the replica of Trevithick's steam carriage, we have the legendary Joe Davis.
How are you? Oh, well, we've brought the weather with us from the Midlands, you see. Always look after you, Dorset. How many years you been coming here then, Joe? About 20, I think. I've been retired 20 years. That figures, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh, it's a pilgrimage, really. End of the season get-together. So what duties are you performing this year? Well, I've been having a look round, seeing if there's any doubtful characters about. But the main aim is to play with my mate Len Crane, the Heavy Haulage man, and so at 1 o'clock we're going to have a start with the Heavy Haulage. That's the first big run.
This steam carriage was the very first mechanically propelled passenger carrying vehicle. Now, can you imagine seeing that come down your street? And think about this, in 1802, what an outstanding shock it must have been for the public, and how long it took them to accept it. I'll bet they said it'll never catch on. But also here we must give full marks to the people who've reproduced this exact replica, that famous old carriage that trundles on, believe it or not, at 8 miles an hour. These performed the carriage service in the City of London, and there are a couple of stories of accidents where these were involved. At this show, you will see, I suppose, the biggest collection of fairground organs in the world. In this case, the famous Anderton Rowlands Merengue. Not only steam operates in the heavy haulage ring. Here we have a couple of good old commercial vehicles pulling, the front one being an ex-military vehicle, the Bedford RL, and that's followed by a purpose-built timber wagon, the Unipower Forester, four-wheel drive with a four-cylinder Gardner engine in it, and they're pulling around quite a heavy trailer, and what's on that trailer? 11.5 tons of timber. So those two wagons have got their work cut out here in the heavy haulage playpen. That's the beauty of this heavy haulage area. Everybody wants to have a go, whether it's breakdown vehicles, timber tractors, steam, diesel, you name it. They all come in and have a go. Here comes Joe, escorting one of the fine engines. Not only at this show, but Joe travels on the continent, many, many shows during the year.
And the whole point is that they just try and run the thing in accordance with the rules of the 1907
Now here's another Fowler outfit, a complete Fowler outfit. Even that old trailer was one of John Fowler's products. Simple, but quite effective in its day. One of Frank Lithgow's engines here, big Fowler Showman's engine. Quite a change from the big industrious-looking haulage engines, but nevertheless capable of a lot of work. Back down in the Fowler section again, and although we have the biggest collection of Fowler machinery ever put together in this country, think of all the hundreds of implements and engines that were cut up and lost. But here's one we shall always remember. That old rotor there, the Fippany Queen, that was the proud possession of Arthur Field, the late Arthur Field, who ran the roller section here from the onset of this show. John Fowler was very famous for his ploughing engines, and here we have a grand selection of them this year. And it's interesting to note that a couple of these engines are still working in the fields of this country today, where the ground is difficult for tractors to operate on. They are still coming in, showing their use. Well, John Fowler would be a very proud man to be here and see how his achievements have been commemorated. John Fowler exported his equipment and engines not only throughout Great Britain, but all over the world. These engines were used in Africa, Australia, and all over the continent, and in many cases operated by natives. And because of their ruggedness and simplicity, they could soon be trained to use and benefit their country. Now that engine there, with the unusual chimney, that was designed for wood burning. A show of this magnitude takes up a considerable amount of time and money during the year. When you think of this site, 600 acres that had to be filled with exhibits, it makes you appreciate the work done by the committee of the Great Dorset Steam Fair. The cost alone of coal, many hundreds of tons of coal burnt just by the steam section alone. And then there are other sections to be catered for. There are a lot of headaches, a lot of work, but when one comes along and enjoys the end product, it's all worth it. Another famous 10 horsepower Fowler, Atlas, was new to Norman E. Box, the Manchester haulage firm. Now, it's the sole survivor of this fleet that hauled massive loads around this country. And here we have a famous film star. Although the official name is Kitchener, she was known in her film as the Iron Maiden. And those of you who saw the film, well, there she is, ready to sign a few autographs for you.
I've got Peter Smart from the Road Locomotive Society. What are your aims at the Great Dorset, Peter?
Well, we like to come down here every year to form a contact point for our members. We have a tent here every time, and it's a good meeting place. We probably see something like 25 to 30% of our members during the course of the show, and of course that is a splendid place to meet, talk, exchange views and so on. And we also sell a few second-hand books and other bits and pieces that members bring along.
Now, what do you think of the show this year?
Well, I mean, this Fowler display here is absolutely magnificent. I've never seen anything like it before. Never seen so many Fowler engines all together at one time. I think that Robert Coles has done an absolutely wonderful job. I mean, the cross-section and the different types of engines that are here today, I don't think we shall ever see so many different Fowler products on one site ever again, unless Robert does something like this in the future.
It's not until you come here you realise just how busy the Fowler Works in Leeds was, isn't it?
Well, that's a fact. They built an awful lot of engines, probably as many as any other manufacturer, certainly more road engines than any other manufacturer, and some very interesting products as well. It's interesting to see the detail differences between the engines. A lot of people say, well, you've seen one Fowler, you've seen them all, but my word, that's not true. Great many differences, detail changes in design, and of course the interesting thing here is that we've got Fowler engines from virtually the last ones made to some very early products, particularly some of these ploughing engines which go back to
latter part of the 1880s, so it's a good time span.
It's amazing the number of people who love to stand and watch the wood sawing. Our top-hatted crowman has been doing this job with his mates for many years at the Great Dorset. It looks fairly straightforward, but much skill and care is involved in this operation. Looks easy, but there's years of practice behind this. This is what's called taking the curve out of the log. That odd bit that they're now losing from the side will leave a fairly straight log to work with. Another form of wood sawing here. Plenty of sawdust around, so they've been busy for a few days. And yet another way to do it. Here's a circular saw driven for the power takeoff at the rear of a Fordson Major tractor. Just look at that immaculate paintwork. Now, I can't imagine them looking like that back when they were earning their keep. But of course, these old tractors are the possessions of very proud preservationists. And that's a lot different than the farmer who owned them back in this case, the late 40s. The only time that would have had a duster over it was if the farmer thought he was going to sell it for a few bob. And once again, we see another fine example of the Marshall tractor. This was such a reliable old brute. A single-cylinder two-stroke diesel on this big 4x4. Fairly old, but still looking brand new, isn't it? Pulling their drags around the tractor area. And, well, it wouldn't be a day without seeing one of those little grey Fergusons on the scene. That wonderful invention of Harry Ferguson, the Irishman, who decided to put the equipment on the back of the tractor as a fixture. And here, the famous American firm of Case, who apparently are building tractors today in Doncaster, and I understand one of the biggest employers in that area. The Fordson Major came out in the 40s, just after the war, to replace the old standard Fordson. Here they come together. That operation bit on the front of the grey Fergie there, that was known as the banana. Look at that massive area that's being worked for 5 days at the Great Dorset Steam Fair. Not a lot of mud about this year. Something different for the tractors to do here, tractor pulling. It's an event that we see throughout the country now with purpose-built tractors, but here at the Great Dorset they do the same thing with the ordinary agricultural tractors, make them work really hard. Another marshal this time, pulling this weight, that the weight increases and the drag increases the further they go, and the object is to see how far and how fast they can get over a particular distance. Some of the purpose-built tractors for this job have big airplane engines and even sort of jet turbine engines, but here at the Dorset we don't allow modern inventions like that on the field. We stick to the old conventional. Of course, these tractor lads always look on this as a bit of a challenge, and when they see one tractor given a pull, well, they're always ready to go along and see if they can better it. This old tractor's got a nice steady job pulling the sled back to the beginning, ready for another pull. Complicated bit of machinery, the sled. The weight on the top moves along, thus increasing the downward pressure, and it takes a lot of power to go the full length of the run, because the faster you and the further you go, then the harder it gets, and you want a lot of brake horsepower to get right up to the end. But here's somebody going to have a go with an old Atkinson, an old 6-wheel recovery vehicle. That old Gardner 6LW engine in there is really going to be put to the test. Famous make of vehicle Atkinson, who started life building steam locomotives and are still on the road today, produced with Seddons, the Seddon Atkinson. And that's how it all works. Those are the covers on the horse's ears, as to stop the flies annoying them throughout the day's work. With a single furrow plough, you would plough something like an acre a day. And it's good to know that the Great Dorset now has become one of the top locations for horse ploughing events in this country. These conditions here aren't ideal by any means, because the soil here is full of flint, and being very dry, it's very difficult. Those stones will throw the plough quite easily off its track. Back-breaking work. Just imagine following those horses for 8 or 10 hours a day. This is an unusual sight, seeing 3 horses. This is the team belonging to Randy Hiscock, a local breeder. These are Suffolk punch horses, and he believes in working them, and he travels all over the place doing this. And this chap coming now, one of his horses actually gave birth at the show, and they've named the foal Blandford, after the location of the Great Dorset Show. The Great Dorset Horse Ring is a show in itself, and many people come just to see this section. Every day you can watch so many things connected to the horse era. The small carts, many splendidly decorated. There are so many areas to cover at this great event, each one well worth a visit. But time is the enemy. Even a 5-day visit leaves a few things unseen.
Lovely to see the young people taking an interest, and Amanda here is ably helped by her fiancé.
And as the sun goes down, many of the exhibits close down or put away. But this is when the fair wakes up. We can't leave without seeing what must be the next best thing to fairyland, the fair at night. I bid you farewell and leave you to enjoy this unique spectacle. The sight, the sound, and the smell. There is no equal.
Clap along with them, folks.